So as I mentioned before the break, we have a guest joining us from Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, who's here on the first staff report, just in case council has any questions. What I'm going to do is just jump over council inquiries for the time being and go right to Jim's report, which is on a revised source water protection plan. So Jim, I'll let you kind of introduce that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, sir. Through your worship. It's been some time since source water protection plans came out, so I was just going to do a very quick 30,000 foot overview just to explain it to council, so some of the new council members or returning council members may not be familiar with the necessity of what this is all about for our resolution we're looking for tonight. Source water protection plans were a recommendation of the Walkerton inquiry in the early 2000s, coming out of the Walkerton tragedy. And it was recommended that every municipal water system have a source water protection plan, whether they were surface water or groundwater wells. Source water protection plans are created using in-depth engineering and hydrogeological background information, and they're site-specific to each system. These plans lay out potential threats to the drinking water system from the neighboring and surrounding properties and businesses, and does lay some restrictions on those properties or what the properties can be used for in the future. After source water protection plans are created, they're approved by the Source Water Protection Authority for the region, and they're overseen by a council approved risk management official or risk management inspector. For the town, this is Ryan Post from Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. Any changes to a classification of a well or increase in pumping rates would necessitate a change to your overall plan for your system, right? Because it's going to change your mapping, your cone of influence of how much water you're taking from the wells, and that could expand it out to neighboring properties, that sort of thing. So before these systems, with any of these changes, wells or pumping rates, they have to go through this process before this is changed and any water can be pumped into that system. In the town of Shelburne's case, we have 6 drilled wells that we use for our water supply. 4 of these wells are within town boundaries, and 2 of these wells are in the neighboring municipality of Melanchthon to the west of us. So they're about 4 kilometers out of town, actually. These wells do fall into 2 different source water protection areas. So wells 1, 3, 5, and 6 are in the Nottawasaga area, and wells 7 and 8 are in the Grand River area, albeit only by about 150 meters, but it's enough to necessitate this whole process. Looking at our future development and what's proposed for the town, we've been working over the last 5 years on rehabilitating some of our current wells. So well 1 and well 3 to restore the original pumping values that they originally had. They've dropped to almost a third of what they were capable of producing originally. And looking at increasing the permit to take water at well 7 and 8, actually doubling the volume of water that we'd be taking from those wells that we currently are taking right now. During well 3's rehabilitation, it was noticed that there was some characteristics given off by the well that changed its criteria from a groundwater well to a groundwater under the influence, under the direct influence of surface water, or a GUDI well. So that does necessitate more treatment and a look back at our entire plan again for our system. This again with our wanting to increase our pumping volumes from well 7 and 8. We started into the process of background testing and monitoring these wells, compiled all that into our new revised source water protection plan. And this was submitted to the South Georgian Bay Lake Simcoe Protection Committee October 26th, and it was approved. A breakdown of these changes for the plan as well as modeling and mapping are attached in Appendix 1, which is Ryan's report. The full document is very large, hundreds of pages, but it is available if council would like a copy of that to read through. Since well 7 and 8 supply are in the Credit River area, the updated source water protection plan must be approved by the Lake Erie Source Water Protection Committee as well. These committees, they sit once every quarter, so it's timing is a bit of an essential factor there to get a resolution from council tonight, and then hopefully have that over to the Lake Erie Committee for presentation January 19th, 2023, and hopefully have approval for them too. So with that, we'll be looking at having public consultations until February, and then hopefully in April or May would be in a position to send this plan off to the ministry for approval, their final approval on that. This should work into, if everything falls into place, that we'd be ready to roll in the fall of 2023, which should coincide nicely with our upgrade to Pump House 3 or Well 3 there with the arsenic reduction build that we have going on right now. For financial impacts, all of this has been budgeted for monitoring and all these reports in past budgets. Our consultations were with Espernet Associates, our town engineers, as well as Banks Groundwater and EarthFX for all the modeling and mapping, as well as Ryan at NBCA. So for council's strategic priorities, it aligns with targets 3, investment and fund critical infrastructure for the future, and target 4 to promote balanced growth. And we do have Ryan post here if anybody has any questions for Ryan on the actual plan or what we needed to do to change our modeling for these wells.
Okay, thank you, Jim. So just so I'm clear, what you need from council is a resolution that just simply endorses those changes at this point?
Yes, through your worship, that would endorse the new plan, and then we can put it over to the Lake Erie Committee for their sitting in January.
Okay. All right, questions for Jim or for Ryan? No. Okay. All right, if not, oh, sorry, Councillor Guichardi.
Sorry, just a quick question on, I'm looking at, so this may be a question for Ryan. Figure 6A4, vulnerability score. I'm seeing a high vulnerability score near PW3. Can you elaborate on that a little bit behind the reasoning?
Yeah, so when we look at the vulnerability, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, when we look at the vulnerability scoring, it's the color scheme of it, where it's red compared to yellow or green, corresponds to the location relative to the well. So closer to the well, you typically will get a red or a higher color. And then when you look at PW3, how you have a big swath of that red going out towards the 4th line, it could be related to the geology of the area. So it could be more sandier. It could be it could be higher permeability in that area compared to other areas around that. That will influence the delineation of the zone and also the vulnerability scoring. So it looks at items such as the depths of the well, the pumping rates around there, the geology, slope, et cetera, So that all influences the delineation of these or the different color schemes that we see here.
Is there a specific threat, external threat in that area that you have a concern about?
So through the RMO work, what I do is where we have these areas that are red or other areas out there, we go on the landscape to see what sort of activities are there. So it's not looking at one focused area saying we're going to focus on agriculture or we're going to focus on ICI or industrial, residential, commercial. It looks at a broad swath of land uses out there. So where we see the red, we could look at the potential threats for agriculture, maybe septics, maybe fuel storage in there too. So it's not isolated to PW3. It's where we see those red areas that really influence the workflow.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bernardo?
Ryan, do we have any of our wells that maybe come under the influence of road salt?
Not that I'm aware of. I could defer to Jim if you know about any trends in chloride or sodium in your wells.
Through your worship, it's not specified that it's road salt, but we do monitor through Aquis sampling of water, quarterly testing. So we do know the sodium levels in well 1 are a little higher than what you'd see in some other wells. So it is fairly close to the Besley drain on Andrew Street there as well. But yeah, they've stayed consistent. So it's not like they're increasing or decreasing. They've stayed at a normal rate. So we do put out that warning or advisory, and Aqua is available too if we do want to have any kind of public information center on that as well. So.
Yeah, so well 3, for example, which is maybe closer to Highway 10 going north, is not necessarily higher in sodium than well 1.
Not that I recall. I don't recall it having any real significant sodium hits on it as well. And usually that flow from Highway 10 is traveling to the east too. So it is away from well 3 at that point. It's further to the west in the subdivision. So.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, so the recommended motion then is just to receive Jim's report and to endorse the proposed amendments that he highlighted. I have a mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. All in favor? It's carried. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right, the next report is from our treasurer, and Carrie's going to give us the 2022 year-end financial position, as well as recommendation for the award of an insurance RFP. Carrie.
Thank you, and through the mayor. This report is just a quick summary of 2022, but it does not include the bills and accounts that you would normally be used to seeing. At this point, I did include the RFPs for award, any RFPs that were awarded for the last quarter. During the election, we did have to exercise the delegated authority of the CAO to award a couple of those RFPs. One of them was for the purchase of a plow truck, and the other one was for the site works for the splash pad. We also did go to RFP for our general municipal insurance. 7 companies downloaded the RFP from our site. 2 companies submitted questions, and 1 addendum was issued. However, only 1 submission was received for the RFP, and that was from Intact Insurance, who is also the town's current provider and has been for the past couple of years now. So the RFP came in at $363,944, which is a 13% increase over our 2022 premium, which overall is lower than the increase that we experienced the previous year. So I think by going out for RFP, we did keep it down maybe somewhat. So the motion before you is to award that RFP to Intact Insurance, and that policy takes effect January 1st, 2023, and is good for the calendar year, with the opportunity to renew that annually for 5 years, with the premiums being reviewed annually, of course. The other thing that we ask of council every year is that a motion be passed to allow for finance staff to transfer to and from reserves at year end to close out any operating capital projects that we had identified to be funded from reserves. These transfers allow for the cash budget to be balanced at the end of the year, and is one of the requests of auditors that they see that motion allowing us to do that. So I don't have a year-end, I think the report, it was a year-end financial report, but I don't have an actual year-end summary of how we're ending the year just quite yet. Budget discussions start off immediately in January with council, and we will have a better understanding of how we're going to end the year by then, for sure.
Excellent. Questions for Carrie? Councilor Bernardo?
So you mentioned that by going out for an RFP on the insurance, we maybe got a lower percentage than if we had not. So is it beneficial maybe to do that every year rather than to renew every year? With, you know, them giving us, well, sorry, you know, it's a 75% increase or whatever the heck they want to give us at the end of the time frame. Is there some benefit to renewing rather than going out to RFP?
So our renewal the previous year was 15% increase. The amount of staff time that is involved in issuing an RFP for insurance is tremendous. And the only reason that it did get done this year is because I didn't have a budget to work on in September. So I was able to work on the RFP.
So we can't use the same RFP, just update it a bit every year.
The problem is it's getting harder and harder for municipalities to get insurance of any type. And the questionnaires and the forms that insurance companies require to be filled out for obvious reasons is very time consuming. And for us to do that annually, no, we can't, we just can't. So,
so we don't have the agents visiting us like we used to years past. Now we have to fill out 50 forms to get something.
mm-hmm. And each entity wants their own forms filled out. So you're doing it for every potential, you know, bidder. So,
but we do have the option if we see things going that we can go to an RFP rather than renewing every year, even though we have the option to renew for the next 5.
You can, yes.
Okay.
Denise?
Just wanted to note that many times the term is also going to affect the price. So if you're only renewing for the year, similar to other things in your personal lives, or 5 years, you get a better term. So part of this RFP was that we expected to have a 5-year relationship with the proponent. And as Carrie's also mentioned, the number of insurers that are providing municipal support is continuing to be reduced. So many of the major public entity insurers have purchased their colleague municipal or colleague companies. And there's probably 3 or maybe 4 firms that provide municipal insurance. Unfortunately, we also are an entity that has areas of very high risk, which, you know, requires certain companies to assess us, and only those companies are willing to manage that kind of risk. So we're very happy to have the relationship continue with Intact, which is formerly Cowan. And the broker that they've assigned to us has also been excellent to work with and has provided us with great support, particularly the number of community-based service needs. So, but certainly as you requested, if our rates go in a way that's it's not sustainable, we would have no choice but to consider alternatives.
Yeah, and I mean, not that it, you know, makes the impact any easier. 13% is kind of in line with, I think, what a lot of other municipalities are are facing right now. So, Councilor Donato,
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. Was one of the groups that came forward to look at us, the AMO LAS? Have we looked at them?
For general municipal insurance?
I thought LAS was offering services as well. The AMO group that offer different services.
Not that I'm aware of. I do have the list of the companies that pulled the tender down off of the site, but I don't think they were one of them.
Okay, thanks.
I think what AMO has is a procurement buying group that you can issue support or RFPs or tender documents through, but I'm not aware that LAS is a direct insurer. We can certainly follow up.
any other questions for Carrie? Okay. So can I have a motion then to receive the report, to award the RFP to Intact Public Entities, and to authorize the treasurer, as Carrie said, to transfer to and from reserves as needed? Moved by Councillor Sample, seconder for that, Deputy Mayor Hall. All in favor? It's carried. All right. Next is a report from our clerk regarding a return to in-person meetings. Jennifer.
Thank you. Through your worship, to members of council, and in consideration of the current time it is, I'll do a quick high-level overview. At the May 30th, 2022 council meeting, council considered a previous report which reviewed alternative options to hold for spacing options to hold council meetings. One being the current council chambers, which unfortunately has been determined that space is no longer usable. The size of it cannot accommodate comfortably a proper meeting. The second option being to relocate the current council chambers to the main floor in Town Hall in the space previously used by Shelburne Police Services. So it was determined within that previous report that space would require significant capital costs to expand the space. And currently we have repurposed this space for staffing offices. The third option was to utilize the Grace Tippling Hall. The Grace Tippling Hall is big enough. It can accommodate staff, it can accommodate council on the stage, and it can accommodate members of the public. We would require an alternative approach to that situation should we return to in-person meetings within the Grace Tippling Hall. If there is a booking for a theater group to use the Grace Tippling Hall, it would be at that point in time, we would revert that specific meeting that is affected to a virtual process for that time. We still are reviewing the options to host hybrid meetings. Even though the report has said it's not possible, this option is still being reviewed. And one thing to note is that live streaming of council meetings has increased public engagement significantly and has proven to be a valuable tool. The provision of live streaming in-person council meetings can be accommodated going forward, utilizing current equipment we have on site. The one ask that we are doing and what staff is currently voluntarily continuing is a mask-friendly approach. So currently staff are committed to voluntarily continue wearing masks and follow social distancing requirements as a precautionary approach and out of respect for colleagues. As for committee meetings, to provide for accessible, barrier-free access to meetings for volunteer members of the various committees of council, it is recommended that these meetings remain in a virtual setting. To provide for accountability and transparency, committee meetings will also be live streamed and recorded. The newly drafted committee terms of reference, which will be recommended to council in January 2023, will include these two requirements. There is a financial consideration and an ask of $2,500 to be placed within the 2023 budget for consideration during budget discussions. And this will allow us, should additional material, audio, visual, require to be purchased, this will allow us to do that in order to provide that hybrid approach. So the recommendation in the report is that either we return to in-person meetings utilizing the Grace Tippling Hall, or that council remains virtual. That's council's decision for this evening. That's the end of my report. If you have any questions.
Thanks, Jennifer. So just so I'm clear, the $2,500 would allow us hopefully to get the equipment needed to continue to live stream or at least record and post video recordings of the meetings that are being held in person, right?
So currently, we can record and live stream those meetings with what we've got. It would allow us to provide the hybrid approach. So in order for some of our presenters who are attending from the city or our town planner coming from Kitchener, it would alleviate the drive here, the 2-hour drive to get here. And the town planner or other those presenters, would be able to sit within the comfort of their own home and still present that information to council without having to drive here. Should a council member become sick, not be able to attend, but would like to, that hybrid approach is there.
Or happens to be out of town. So yeah, okay. Right.
Exactly. If we're at the AMO conference, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Councilor Bernardo. I have no idea what you're about to say.
I agree that the former council chambers is basically useless. I haven't been in there for enough years. There's no way you can accommodate. Yeah, you're right. You know what I'm going to say. I hate Zoom meetings. They are the worst way, as far as I'm concerned, to communicate. It makes it so difficult. I understand a lot of people watch the meetings, don't necessarily participate in the meetings. We never get questions. And formerly, when we did meet in council chambers, we had people who did come in who had questions to ask the council during question period. And that's the thing that I don't see happening with the current Zoom meeting situation. Yes, people watch, but nobody seems to put in questions. They're just interested in seeing what council's doing. And the thing is, we get the questions when we're walking around, maybe prior to council or after council, but we'll get a question, at least I do anyway, as to what's going on or what's happening or why isn't council doing this or why isn't council doing that. And sometimes it's difficult for me to answer because I'm one council member, I'm not council. And it makes it, extremely difficult for me to answer. So by in-person council meetings, and Grace Tippling Hall, if it does work out, will allow the public also to ask and come in and ask questions of council. May it be a microphone at the back of the hall. I don't know how staff will do it, but it at least will allow them to come in and be able to ask the questions of council rather than a council member on his own. And that's something that I would like to see happen again.
I will share that the recommendation here, it is very close to what County Council considered last Thursday in terms of keeping committee meetings virtual for a whole host of reasons. It's easier for people if those meetings are during the day. It's easier, I think, for some public members to attend virtually than it is to in person, but to move back to in-person council meetings in one way, shape, or form. So county staff is sort of going through an exercise right now because we have space issues as well. So I think, if we adopt that strategy, we're kind of in line with what the county's doing. And personally, I think it makes a lot of sense. But any other thoughts, Councillor Sample?
And is there a possibility to allow the committees to make their decision if they want to go back to meetings or stay at the Zoom side of it? Or do we just direct them that they're going to Zoom?
Denise, you have thoughts from a staffing point of view?
So we looked at a number of other scenarios, and Jennifer has summarized what staff is recommending in our report. And the reason is, and I think the word that we want to emphasize is a barrier-free opportunity. The ability for many people to volunteer comes with some constraints. And what we found is that with the electronic format, those constraints are almost eliminated. So I don't need to worry, for example, about childcare or traveling or weather. And I can then attend the meeting. So my ability to participate is significantly enhanced. It also reduces any costs associated with that person needing to commit if they have other impacts. So again, using childcare or elder care that removes their ability from being able to attend an in-person meeting. So that was part of the reason. And it was about, again, making participation as seamless as possible. And we weren't looking at a hybrid. We were looking at an administrative protocol based on all committee meetings. And again, similar to what the mayor just mentioned, the county had already implemented as the model. Council in person, which we understand is probably the direction you're supporting, and committees remaining virtual, at least for 2023. And if that wasn't functional, then certainly that could be reassessed.
Right. So I do understand that. And I sit on other boards and committees other than the town side of it, i.e. soccer and et cetera. And we went back to meeting in person. And then if anybody that couldn't had the opportunity to join via the Zoom setup that we did. And we had basically full attendance. Either you applied in person or you didn't. Majority was in person. We only had the odd two that ran into an issue with daycare that couldn't have that, and they just joined Zoom when they couldn't do that. So I'm just asking if that can be an opportunity and just saying it's going to be Zoom 100%.
The other option would be the logistics of where those meetings are going to be held, because we've already identified that the council chambers is too small for a number of reasons. And that is simply the only facility that we own. And if it was going to be in another location that required a rental, that would have to be incorporated into the budget. And then we'd have to go through any technology related implications as well. So our intent was that the meetings would be live streamed or posted on YouTube, if not live streamed and recorded this time as well, to increase the visibility of these committees and public participation. But certainly, it's the will of council on what structure you would like to have in place. We've simply recommended what we think is the most beneficial approach.
And I can see for some of the committees that we have, I can understand that, but then you've got CDRC, you have Fire Board, you have Police Board, you have those major board companies that.
So just to clarify, they're not within our jurisdiction to provide oversight for. This is strictly for the committees of council. This does not apply to the library, CDRC, nor PSB.
Okay. Thank you.
And again, I think, Denise, your point was a good one. And it's right in the recommendation that, that this is for the 2023 year. So once we get the new slate of committee members in place, get through this first year, if we find out this isn't working, we can look at this again next year. But Councillor Guicciardi?
Ken, is there a possibility of remaining in a Zoom setting as we explore and move forward with a hybrid model, instead of jumping, from one to the other, going right from Zoom right to all in person? We've got, we have some time to explore that, the Zoom option or the hybrid option that would kind of alleviate the need for all of us to be in the same room at the same time and creating space issues. Also, it would be more accessible to council members who, for one reason or another, we're unable to either arrange daycare or be here in person, or because of, I mean, it allows us the most flexibility and gives us the best of both worlds. And I know the desire is eventually to move back into in person, but as opposed to just flipping a switch and saying, hey, okay, so now we're all going back to in person, let's at least have the opportunity to maybe explore a hybrid model as we phase into in-person meetings as the year goes by.
And through your worship to Councillor Guichardi, that is currently what we're exploring. At the moment, there is a budgetary constraint. There is the funding is what is required in order to allow for that option to continue.
Okay,
So-
noted.
So I'll maybe phrase it another way. Assuming that ask makes it through the 2023 budget process and the funds are approved, can we sort of get that hybrid option up and running pretty quickly?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not so much a technical barrier that we're exploring, it's just we need to get the money in place to buy what we need.
Correct.
Okay. All right, any other thoughts? Okay, so the recommendation obviously then is to receive Jennifer's report, to continue committee meetings in the virtual form for the 2023 calendar year, to include the $2,500 budget item in the 2023 budget to allow for the hybrid option, and to resume in-person council meetings in Grace Tippling Hall. I guess with the caveat that if there's a conflicting booking on a particular council night, we would go back to Zoom for that specific meeting night. Is there a mover and seconder for all of that? Councillor Bernardo?
I will second that.
Councillor Guichardi, okay. Any further discussion on that one? All in favor? That's carried. Excellent. Okay. So the next council meeting then will be here in person?
That's correct, January 9th.
All right. Don't smile too large there, Councillor Bernardo. All right, next report is again from our clerk, and this is regarding our board and committee appointments.
Yes, and through your worship to members of council, knowing there is some discussion to take place, I will just do a very quick, again, high-level overview. Currently, as we enter a new term of council, there is a requirement to appoint members to the 6 committees of council and 5 local boards of management. Generally, boards and committees meet either once per month or quarterly. Meetings are generally held on a prescribed day and week of the month. Each entity, so each board, this referring to our boards of management, each board operates as a separate entity to the town of Shelburne and have their own operating procedures, agreements, and staff. The land and buildings are town-owned and are listed as assets for the town of Shelburne. Committees of council generally have the same meeting schedule as noted in the prior paragraph. They are required to abide and follow certain policies of council, the committee terms of reference, which we are noting is being updated, council procedural bylaw, council code of conduct, accountability and transparency policy, social media policy. So as noted, we are currently in the process of updating the terms of reference. The DEI committee also has their own separate terms of reference. So the newly drafted terms of reference for all committees will be presented to council in January 2023. The draft has included that a maximum of 2 members of council be appointed to each town committee. This report is recommending that the maximum of 2 be approved. We did start advertising on November 1st. We have extended the deadline for applications to December 31st. And a staff report will be provided in January 2023 regarding appointments of citizens to committees of council and local boards. Noted in here also regarding the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Committee is on June 13th. Report LS 2022-10, we recommended that the name of the DEI committee be changed from Diversity, Equity, Inclusion to Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Committee. The report recommended the committee's name, so this report, apologies, recommends the committee's name not be revised to DEIA and remain at its previous DEI, primarily due to the impacts to the logo that was designed through a community youth engagement project. Adapting a new logo to capture the new DEIA logo cannot be accommodated due to the need for major redesign work. That being said, knowing there is considerable discussion to be had, I'll end it there and take any questions if you have any.
So we'll do questions for Jennifer first, and then we'll jump into trying to sort out who's going to fill what seat. Councillor Fegan and then Councillor Donato.
Just a quick question there. On the list of committees there, I don't see the NVCA. Was that just an oversight?
Yes, apologies. That is included. We will be required to appoint someone to the MBCA. Yes.
It's on my list. We'll get there. Councillor Donato, same question?
No, actually, follow up on that question. That appointment needs to be made tonight because maybe the January will allow for it. Because if I'm stepping off it and whoever's stepping on will need to be appointed and sent to the NVCA to be officially recognized, because the January meeting will be our last meeting that I would be at. No, my question for Jennifer is kind of two questions actually. One, why 2 members only?
This reflects the new draft terms of reference that it will be coming forward to council, whereas we had recommended the maximum of 7 members per committee plus 2 voting members of council.
Yeah, I guess the question is why only 2 members of council, and is it because of the draft, the recommendations in the draft report coming forward? Is there any specific reason for only 2? Is it to allow more members of public, or that's why I guess I'm questioning why just 2 members of council on any committee?
We're hoping to obtain additional members of the public in order to engage and have them be a voice within the town. I think Denise may have something to contribute.
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. Through the mayor. So we did look at best practices of many municipalities with respect to terms of references. And we know that others have actually, there's a sort of a split between those that have voting and non-voting. And we recognize that the practice of council has had to have voting members of council represented on the committees. 3 members of council is pretty close to quorum. So we suggested that 2 would be sufficient. And in some places, there's only 1 member of council on committees that municipalities appoint. And that it also, as Jennifer mentioned, I think gives a little bit more of a balance, and there's then greater public representation on the committee than there are members of council. So it's just what we've recommended, and we still think it's functional. Just for general day-to-day practice, you are all exceptionally busy, and to have 3 of you on one committee, and given how many committees there are, may stretch you quite leanly. So this may provide you with a better balance on a max of 2 members of council per committee.
My second question is regarding the DEI committee and accessibility. As we grow to 10,000, we have to have an accessibility committee by what the province has told us. Am I correct in that?
So what the requirement is that you have an accessibility coordinator, not so much an accessibility committee. So the town, once we reach population of 10,000, will be required to have a dedicated accessibility coordinator on staff. The DEI, the diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility is captured within the inclusion and inclusive.
Yeah,
part of it.
Understandable. But again, going back to representation, we need to make sure that we have at least enough people with accessibility issues on that type of a committee and maybe responding to the coordinator as well throughout the town. Is that a fair comment?
Yes, that's a fair comment, keeping in mind that this committee will also be required to go through the interview process.
Understood.
Ace?
Through the mayor, and just to clarify for Councillor Bernardo, even with the change back as recommended, if approved to DEI, the mandate of the DEI would be updated to ensure that the priority of accessibility was fully reflected in terms of what they would be achieving, the goals, as well as the work plan. So it's, again, a fantastic logo that a number of committee members helped facilitate and lead. And in hindsight, we should have thought of that earlier, and I'll take the responsibility for that. But we thought it's much easier. And they also have shirts, not that they couldn't get new shirts, but it was just simply protecting that effort, and then just making sure that accessibility certainly would be a very high priority and well profiled as a function of this committee.
Yeah, and I guess the reason for my commentary is to make sure that people with accessibilities don't feel that that's a committee that has nothing to do with them or they don't join. I want to make sure that they are represented on that. I know it's been difficult over the years to get members to come out and be a part of the committee, and that's one of the reasons why the motion went through to inclusive, making them a part of the DEI to get that membership there, hopefully at some point in time. But I want to make sure that they feel they can be a part of that committee and recognize that they can be a part of that committee. So that's the only reason for my commentary.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments before we start trying to fill these? All right, so we'll jump right in. Not entirely sure what we'll do if we get more than 2 interested councillors for each one, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So the first one is the CDRC Board of Management. Any interest in that?
I'll stay on that one.
Okay, so we have three right out of the gate. So we have Deputy Mayor Hall, Councillor Wagner, and Councillor Sample. Okay, gonna write down all 3, and we're gonna circle back to the ones where we have more than what we need. How about the Library Board? We just need 1 for that one. Deputy Mayor, you were on that last term. It's not to say you have to stay on, or Councillor Wagner, you interested in that one? Okay, Fire Board. Okay, so we have 3 again, Hall, Bernardo, and Gachardy. Okay. Police Service Board, as Jennifer indicated in the report, that's typically mayor and deputy mayor. I think basically unless one of us were conflicted somehow, but deputy mayor and I have spoken, and I think both of us are fine with that one. The BIA rather, 1 member for that one.
I can take that one.
I'll take that one as well.
Okay, we have Gachardy and Wagner. Okay, and Sample. Okay. Everybody's too eager. County Council last week, we had a hard time filling them. Arts and Culture Committee, 2 members. Councillor Wagner. Okay.
Must have been back up on that one. Was hoping to step down, but that's all right.
Okay.
And sorry, and just to clarify, you don't have to have 2. We've just suggested a maximum of 2. So just so you know, you're not obligated to put 2. I mean, you could have maybe a backup if somebody wasn't there, that they're a pinch hitter. Just so.
Maybe slot me in for a pinch hitter then for that.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Fegan as an alternate. All right. Okay, Canada Day, which I suspect might be popular as well. Councillor Fegan. Anybody else for that one? Anybody else for Canada Day?
Sorry, Kyle. It's not that I don't love you, man, but
Don't worry. We gotta
it's
get to
been
you
like,
tomorrow. Yeah.
All right, the DEI committee, which will have the added mandate function of accessibility, although it's not being added to the name. Okay, so Donato, Paul, 30. Okay, economic development committee. Donato. I'll jump back on that one. Okay, heritage committee. Councilor Fegan, Councilor Wagner. Parks and Rec Task Force.
I can sit on that.
Okay. Councilor Wagner, Councilor Sample. All right, NVCA. So Councilor Bonato has sat on that for a number of years. Councilor Fegan, okay.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm glad.
Like I said, I didn't want to step on your toes last time. I was one that I was hoping for. So as long as you don't mind.
I think after 23 years, you can have it.
And that one requires some travel too, right?
Yeah, you are compensated for that as well.
No,
All right, so we'll cycle back. So we have 3 for each of CDRC, Fire Board, BIA, and DEI committees. So those who sort of volunteered for more than one, I would ask that you kind of decide which ones are most important to you. For CDRC, so we had Deputy Mayor Hall, Councillor Wagner, and Councillor Sample. All 3 of you still keen on that?
I'm only on Parks and Recs right now, so I only got one.
Okay.
I can step back, I guess. I mean, I think I was able to facilitate some progress with the CDRC over my 4 years. So, I mean, I'd like to continue with that, but at the same time, if, you know, Dan's going to be there to kind of champion on, then I'm
Ben,
okay
I've been
with that.
there. I've been there 8 years now. So
What I would suggest, similar to what Denise suggested for arts and culture, Lindsay, are you okay if we leave you as an alternate? So if the deputy mayor or Councillor Sample can't go, then does that work, Jennifer, or is that going to be too complicated for records?
Well, that with that being a board of management, it's not town staff that are facilitating that. So I will have to check with the staff.
Okay.
At the CDRC and see what they recommend.
If we can do it, I think that's appropriate, and I think even more so because it is a board of management, and the number of votes that we have at a meeting matter. So if one of our actual assigned members can't be there, I think it's only fair. I mean, similar to county council allows, you know, each municipality to name sort of an alternate member if one of the designated members can't be there. So, okay. Okay, then on to fire board. So we have Deputy Mayor Hall, Councillor Bonato, and Councillor Biscardi. Councillor Bonato.
I'm the current chair. I've been on that board for quite a number of years and deal with the issues there. I'd like to continue on that board. That is the one board that I do want to be a part of. And that's the only board that I've applied for.
Okay. Councillor Hall.
Again, yeah, similar in nature with some of the ongoing things. I think it's best if I stay on that board.
Okay.
Ouch.
There are some very hard issues going on right now, and that's the reason why I think you're seeing the 2 of us stay on. We have some major problems there that we're dealing with.
Okay.
Okay. All right. BIA. So we have 3 for 1 spot.
I would like to be on the BIA. I live right downtown. It's one of the things that I'm passionate about is this downtown core.
Okay. Sorry, Jennifer.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, knowing the BIA may need some extra help, I'm wondering if we could consider 2 appointments, right?
I think BIA is going to need a bit of help. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I don't think probably 1 is enough, to be honest, having
I don't think so.
filled that position for a few years, my first term. Yeah.
I would welcome the help.
Okay.
And I'd like to go onto that board just because a lot of my platform was based on redoing the boundary lines, right? So I think it's a good thing for me to sit on that one.
Okay. Lindsay?
Yeah, I'm cool with that. For me, it was events, right? So community events and things like that the BIA sort of tends to offer. So I know how they struggle with creating those and facilitating their production. So yeah, I'm cool.
Oh, you can always help.
I know, I volunteer anyway. At least now I don't have to actually run it.
Okay, so that brings us to the last one, which is the DEI committee. So we have the same runoff in terms of members that we did for the fire board. We have Hall, Bonato, and Gishardi. So
I have served on that board as a committee member in the past year and a half. So I'd like to continue on that if possible.
My only interest is in the accessibility side of it, because that's something that is kind of due to the diversity and equity. Like, that's the only reason why.
And again, from my side, it's looking at the overall town and the changes and a lot of the things that I heard going into this term, and would like to work towards making an impact similar to what the previous deputy mayor was able to do.
okay. So it doesn't sound like anybody's willing to yield on that one, which is fine. 2 ways, I guess, of sorting this out. We could draw names or put it to a vote. Thoughts?
Draw names.
I'm fine either way.
Then it's a look at the draw.
But let me ask the 3 who are vying for the 2 spots. Deputy Mayor, would you prefer drawing names or a vote?
I'm good either way, to be honest with you.
Denise, do you have a suggestion?
So similar to exemptions that exist to accommodate unique situations, the third option is that you could make an exception for one committee, DEI, that for 2020 or this term, it would have the continuation of 3. That's certainly not what staff would recommend, but certainly hearing what you're saying, it might be justified.
And
I think
I'm fine with that too.
I think that's a good idea myself.
I mean, I think all 3 of you obviously have passionate reasons for being on it. So, yeah, so unless somebody has a real objection to allowing all 3 members, let's do that. Don't see any objections. Okay. So just to run back through to make sure my notes are correct. So CDRC, we have Deputy Mayor Hall and Councillor Sample with Councillor Wagner as an alternate, provided we can clear that through the board. Library, we have Councillor Wagner. Fire Board, we have the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bonato. Police Service Board, we have Mayor and Deputy Mayor. BIA, we have Councillor Gishardi. Arts and Culture, we have Councillor Wagner with Councillor Fegan as an alternate. Canada Day Committee, we have Councillor Fegan. DEI, we have Councillor Bonato, Deputy Mayor Hall, and Councillor Gishardi. Economic Development, we have Councillor Bernardo and myself. Heritage Committee, we have Councillor Fegan and Councillor Wegner. Parks and Rec Task Force, we have Councillors Wegner and Sample. And NVCA, we have Councillor Fegan. Jennifer?
I did not hear Councillor Sample's name for BIA representative. Do you have that?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Okay.
Too many chicken scratches on that column. Okay. Councillor Guichardi?
I will assist Councillor Fegan on the Canada Day Committee should.
Thank you
he
very
requ-
much. Please do.
Should he require and or beg for my assistance?
Consider me begging. There you go.
Okay, excellent.
All right.
So that's sorted out. So as part of the recommendation, you'll see in the agenda, staff will then bring back a bylaw at our next meeting that kind of formalize those. So the recommendation then is to receive the report. Yeah, that the term is a 4-year term, obviously, that the D, E, I, and A committee be switched back to DEI committee, and that staff bring back the bylaw at our January 9th meeting to formalize the appointments we've just sorted out. So kind of a mover and seconder for that. So Sample, seconded by Councillor Wegner. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, next is a bylaw, which is a typical sort of year-end bylaw, which provides for the levy and collection of taxation. Carrie, do you want to discuss that at all? Or?
Not unless anyone has any questions. It's just the normal tax rate bylaw, so that we can bill the first day back when we're back in the office in January for the interim billing, which is 50% of the previous year's taxes.
All right, kind of a mover and seconder then for that bylaw. Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Sample. All in favor? It's carried. Okay, next is for council to consider a bylaw authorizing TAG security to provide winter parking enforcement. Jennifer, did you want to comment on that one at all?
Just a general information that we find ourselves short-staffed for the winter parking season, and there is a necessity to appoint an alternative solution currently to enforce our winter parking.
And TAG was the company that we used last year as well.
That's correct, yes.
Councillor Bernardo?
I will support that motion. Just quickly, I find that even now, with the lack of snow, we've been lucky so far that our vehicles parked on the road. And last Thursday night, for example, there was a vehicle parked on the wrong side of the road, on the right side of the road, but through the storm, and wasn't tagged during the night. So the overnight parking needs. The parking needs to be seriously looked at, and if we do need something to make sure that vehicles are not there, it's no plows.
Okay.
Should the bylaw pass this evening, it will be starting at 12:01 a.m.
I have a question.
Councillor Sample.
Since you had TAG last year, do you know how many tickets they issued last year?
Yeah, I don't have the total number, but they did issue a substantial number of tickets, which far exceeded previous years. Unfortunately, the collection of fines associated with that is not the same. The majority, well, I won't say the majority, I will say 35% of those tickets are held up in POA court.
POA court meeting?
Those that received the tickets chose not to pay it. Once they choose not to pay it and fight it, it goes to POA.
Okay.
Provincial.
So I'm just,
I apologize.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. I got it now. I'm just curious on then, how much do we pay TAG to do this for the year or this winter months?
We pay them an hourly rate.
Okay. So
And
does
I
that,
can send you a copy of the contract if you'd like.
okay, if you don't mind, I'd just like to see if it warrants, like, are we making money? Are we making even money compared to what we're doing on the outside of it? That's all.
I mean, if you look at the alternative, we'd be having to pay a staff member in absence of having, and I don't have that staff member currently.
No, I get it. Yeah, just numbers from my head. That's all. Thank you.
So just to interject, Jennifer, Councillor Sample, Jennifer did a report last year, and similarly, the numbers aren't much different. We can send you that. And as she noted, this is simply a gapping issue. So we're simply supplementing what we would have been paying our staff member by porting those costs to a contract. So it's actually sort of revenue neutral, expense neutral, or should I say more expense neutral. We'll give you the report because we did an estimate last year of
Awesome.
exactly what this that and again, apologies, I know you know a lot, but you've been gone for a bit, so we shouldn't assume you know every single staff report that's gone on the previous term. So we'll flip that over to you for all the background.
Perfect. Thank you.
I can also send you a copy of the bylaw enforcement statistics. They report in quarterly as well, so I'll send you that as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Councilor Bernardo.
I had a quick question on the POA. Did we not in the last term of council pass something to get around the problems we're having with the courts, the POA courts, or is everything still going to the POA courts?
Jennifer.
What I brought forward to council previously was a consideration to review the alternative. It's the AMP system.
Yeah.
Alternative monetary penalty system, which is all managed in-house, but that requires significant work involved in that. So council supported that direction, and we are currently working on that.
So do we have a hope of seeing a staff report back at sometime soon, Jennifer?
Probably within Q2 of next year. You'll see there is a requirement for terms of reference for that. There is significant background work involved in that.
And does that in the end have to go to the Attorney General's for approval?
Only the short form wording associated with the new bylaw.
Okay, thank you. But that would considerably get us away from the issues we're having with POA currently, right? So
100% it will, yes.
So
And all of that revenue stays in-house, aside from having to pay a screening and hearing officer and your staff.
Okay. Sorry, Carrie, you were gonna add to that?
Carrie.
Yes, if I can, just provide some financial figures for 2023 or 2022. So at the beginning of this calendar year, we would have contracted bylaw services as well for the overnight parking. And that cost $11,500. And for parking fine revenue to date, we've collected $13,700. So I can't say specifically how much of the 13,700 was related to tags ticketing. But that is the revenue that we're showing in the books currently, not including anything that's held up in court that we may still eventually receive some of it. So like Denise said, it is at this point, it is kind of revenue neutral.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to sort of interject again, that the parking tickets are currently still at $10. Council had directed us some time ago to proceed with increasing that to more, $40. It's just the process to get that ratified is held up as well. So,
Okay. Councilor Wagner.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a very quick question. Any idea when the shortage of staffing will be corrected or fulfilled?
so I'll speak to that. So by contracting TAG to help us get through the key winter enforcement, which was the primary responsibility of the second municipal law enforcement officer, who is now working straight days, we probably won't need to have that position filled until Q2 or early Q3 to get us through. Winter parking usually, I mean, it because we still are seeing snow in April. So we will be relooking at that early in the new year and looking at the timing. And again, probably late Q2, Q3 that we're back to having 2 full-time staff.
All right, I have a mover and seconder then for that bylaw. Moved by Councillor Gashardi, seconded by Councillor Fegan. In favor? It's carried. All right, and Deputy Mayor just reminded me that we need a motion to sit past 10 o'clock. Deputy Mayor, happy to make that motion, I'm sure.
Certainly.
Seconded by Councillor Bernardo. All in favor? Carried. All right, thank you. So the next is a resolution from our DEI committee, which is suggesting that we provide the use of the Grace Tippling Hall to the Dufferin County Canadian Black Association for Black History Month, and further that $2,500 from the DEI budget, which was allocated in 2022, be provided to DCCBA for the Black History Month activities. Mover and seconder for that. Councillor Fegan, seconder. Councillor Bernardo. Okay. Any discussion on that? Councillor Hall, or sorry, Deputy Mayor Hall.
Again, just a concern. I know that staff brought this forward earlier tonight when we were talking about the grant funding. So my assumption would be that this would be the last time we deal with this, as it is covered under what going forward should be changes with regards to grant funding.
You mean in terms of one group funding another?
Yeah. So if council's already funding them under another source, this is funding them again from a similar source again. So really, if we were to look at this, I know that the request tonight was for 10,000. So really this year would end up at 12,500.
If I may, I completely, for some reason, missed that portion of that. I don't know if I need to rescind my motion on that one, or can we do a recorded vote to allow me to change my vote on that?
Sure. You can do either.
If I can rescind my motion on that one, simply because of that.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wants to move the motion?
I'm just a little torn. Like, I want to support, but my concern stems from if the DEI was going to produce an event, then the funding would support that. But because the DEI isn't doing an event, the DEI committee decided to support the DCCBA with providing an event. So I think that's where the DEI committee was coming from, was to put the money that they would have used for an event being offered through the DEI committee to the DCCBA because of the council turn year and not being able to sit and meet beyond the last meeting. We didn't have time, or the DEI committee did not have time in order to facilitate putting an event forward, which was going to happen so quickly into the new year with being February as Black History Month. So I completely understand what Deputy Mayor Hall is saying with regards to, you know, if the grant funding goes through, then you're correct at that kind of point. It would be funded by, you know, 2 separate entities, but yet the same. Then, yeah, it would be around 12,500. So I'm torn.
If I may,
this year, sorry, for the committee, like the committee just didn't have the capacity to do the event themselves. Okay, sorry, yeah. Deputy Mayor.
If I may, we can always look at the fact that, you know, if everything was approved as currently requested, the 10 and plus the 2,500, that would be the 12,500.
Yep.
You know, we can certainly reassess during the review process and make necessary adjustments at that point if we've already put 2,500 in with regards to this activity.
Okay, so
it's just a point that, you know, going forward, understanding clearly that there's another $2,500 here in play that we have to consider as we go through with the grant funding.
Okay. Councillor
Right.
Bernard?
If, I know the DEI couldn't host the committee, but would the, I'm not gonna say the 15 initials, DEC, whatever committee, they would still, DBA or whatever, they would still put on the Black History Month within the town, would they not?
They may do some things, I guess, independently, but I guess the nuance here is that the DEI committee has sort of formally asked them to host those events on committee's behalf.
We're sort of paying them to do an event for us because we couldn't do the event, is what I'm gathering from the discussion. And that's why I guess I'm seconding it. But I also get the other point that we have a double dip going on here, which is what the deputy mayor's trying to point out, that we've got to be careful doesn't happen in the future. Even, we can't have, because it is just the one taxpayer at the end of the day. So that I guess that was the question, that why I was asking it. I have seconded it, and I will continue to leave my name on as a seconder. But from now on, we have to be careful when we do those kinds of things.
Okay, Denise, and then Deputy Mayor Hall.
Through your Mayor Mills, I just wanted to provide clarification based on my understanding is that the approach that the DEI took is that they wouldn't duplicate or try to take on initiatives where there were subject matter expert organizations that could facilitate that. I think what's missing though in the actual motion, and this was something that I asked for clarification on just in an email, is that it is in partnership with the DEI in many ways, similar to last year, the radio contest and a number of other elements of the project were still highly supported by the town of Shelburne through the DEI. So just for clarification, yes, it is $2,500 in addition to the 10. And even if it wasn't due to the timing of the election, the DEI probably still would have needed some other organizations, similar to how Orange Shirt Day was facilitated working with another organization. Would we have spent $2,500 as the town? I don't know, but I just wanted to provide a little bit of background on the history of that event because that was how it was structured in 2021 as well. 2022.
Deputy Mayor Hall.
Yeah, and just, again, when we look at what we went through tonight, just for everyone to remember, we also went through Get Outreach that is also looking at doing Black History Month, which, we've got multiple community organizations trying to help and partake, and, we're spreading that amongst more, and maybe it wasn't a consolidated thought or effort that went into the process prior to.
Sorry, Councillor Guichardi, and then I'll go to Kerry.
I was going to say, is there a way of getting DCCBA and GET to partner in this together and share some of the load financially, along with the DEI committee?
That, I think, could be a recommendation from our review committee. It wouldn't be unprecedented. We've made similar suggestions in the past, I think, to groups that have similar mandates.
So if the DEI committee makes available $2,500 to be shared amongst those two groups to put on a joint event.
I wouldn't suggest doing that for this year, only because that's not the recommendation coming from
right.
Going forward, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Kerry, and then Councillor Wagner.
So through the mayor, I was just noticing too, the motion that's coming up after this one is the request to put any unused funds into a reserve. So those reserve funds could be used to offset this cost in 2023.
Good point. Okay, Councillor Wagner.
Yeah, and sort of just to Kerry's point there as well, and it's sort of mirrors Deputy Mayor Halls, is that the budget for the DEI still comes from the taxpayer. It still comes from us. So it's still kind of in that same category, right? Whether a reserve or not. But then just to speak to Councillor Guichardi's point, I think if we, I mean, I know the Mayor Mills already basically said we wouldn't do it this year, but I think if we don't want to take away from Get Outreach, because they have other programs like their SEEP programs and things like that. So their 3,000 isn't specifically for Black History Month. It covers a bunch of other programs and educational aspects as well. So I would caution against that, but I do agree with you with having them work together for potentially this specific, month. Definitely.
Oh, I'm Councillor Wagner, and through the mayor, I'm not suggesting that, that we take away from what Get Outreach is receiving or potentially receiving. Okay, I'm just saying is that the funds that were going to Black History Month from the DEI committee, you know what I mean, for in future could be, it could be maybe better utilized as a joint project between the two.
Gotcha.
That's all.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks for clarifying. I thought more that you were thinking sort of almost like reducing that Get wanted 3,000 and just sort of, but no, thank you for clarifying.
That 2,500 would be a separate from either of their asks, no matter what they do eventually receive.
Gotcha.
So in the interest of moving this along, now that I kind of understand the context a little bit more, I'll go ahead and move it. Councillor Bernardo, are you still okay to second it? Okay. Sort of with the caveat again that this probably wouldn't be something that maybe support next year, but I get it this year that the committee doesn't have the time or resources to do it. So it makes sense to let somebody who does and somebody who knows what they're doing do it. So with that, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Okay, that's carried. All right. Okay, so the next item is another resolution from the DEI committee, and that is essentially asking that any leftover funds from this year's budget be placed into a reserve for next year. And to our treasurer's point, that can be considered as part of our discussion on DEI budget allocation for 2023, knowing that we're going to have some money already in reserve to get started. Is there a mover and seconder for the motion? Councillor Sample, seconded by Councillor Fegan. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Carried. Okay. All right, and the last item, which is another resolution from DEI, get the right one up here, is a request that $100 be used to print cards and a letter from the chair to put in the Shelburne Community Welcome Baskets. We heard from that organization tonight. We know what they're all about. So I guess it's just a formal request asking that some money be set aside for that purpose. Is there a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Guichardi, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. Any discussion? All in favor? It's carried. All right. All the way back to council inquiries. Are there any inquiries? Councillor Fegan?
I have one, and I think this is probably best directed at Denise. I know that we, last term of council, discussed this already, and I know that we have our SDR coming. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it February that's supposed to be coming back, our SDR? Oh, sorry, Denise, you're on mute.
Sorry, my cursor was on the other screen. I had to bring it back.
Fair enough.
So the operations review will be coming back through an update report in January, and some of the recommendations that were made from Optimus will be referred to for your consideration in the 2023 budget. But okay, you will get the summary of that assessment, which is to be received. I think I'm going to get the final draft of it this week, end of week, or early next week.
Okay, the reason I ask is because the snow has finally started to fall, and I think I wanted to bring back the conversation that we had regarding our accessible parking spaces. Last council seemed to agree that us asking the town staff to put in a little bit of extra effort into clearing out the boulevard and the sidewalks and the accessible parking spaces is something that would be beneficial. Now, I know, and I do thank you for your legwork that you already put into looking to see if other municipalities have already done this, and it looks like we would be pioneers in this. So I guess my question would be, is this something that we could discuss and potentially implement for this year?
So I see Jim just logged on. So we actually, after the discussion last year, implemented removal on our own and without creating a policy. So we created a schedule and a prioritization of those locations. We did a statistic. Well, we identified where those locations were, particularly the 4 or 5 that are in the downtown quads. The staff were actually attending to those to have that snow removed. So Jim, do you just want to speak to that in terms of the locations that we had in front of the 2 businesses, the one by the post office, the library, and a couple other ones, particularly in the core?
Yeah, we did have a discussion there with staff, and we did implement last year that they spend more time in that area with the tracklesses while they were doing the sidewalks and root out those openings. So there wasn't that additional, I guess you'd say the main travel portion of the sidewalk, and where you clear it if you're coming over the curb from the parking area. So that will ensure that staff's still doing that. But yeah, we did implement that last year. So
perfect. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Any other inquiries, Councillor Wagner?
Yes, thank you so much. Just kind of quickly, I know that, we get to correspondence and you pull things as well, but, there is one, number 14, which is regarding the Bill 23. So just wondering if staff can address, will there be a report coming to council regarding Bill 23 now that it's been implemented regardless, just to, I don't know, sort of update us and the public. My concerns are that if there's anyone watching still, hopefully tonight, we can give them an idea as to when this report, if there's still one coming to us, is going to be presented so that they can tune in and they can become more familiar with the aspects of this bill and the outcomes or ramifications to local municipalities.
To Councillor Wagner through the mayor. So we were planning to have a report brought back to council in January. I think we were all surprised how quickly this bill received royal assent. AMO has done a significant amount of review, as have many of the professional organizations. I think it's universal that the concerns are quite significant. Particularly the financial ramifications that many of us have started to estimate. So we'll be able to provide council with a high-level review on the development charges impact and how that affects particularly studies, parkland dedication, and some of the other key issues that could affect infrastructure funding and the debt load with respect to how those capital projects were assumed to have been or would be paid for, and how those timelines were contingent upon DCs or other funding sources for $30 billion projects, let's say, and what that means with respect to council's decision-making and how it may affect the project timelines. And in a case like ours, where we have no capacity or allocation, that development would only be proceeding on the funding by the existing taxpayer for the most part. So these are critical issues for us. We have identified to you as council, even prior councillors that have rejoined us, that debt was probably one of the most consequential issues that we would be facing for the next 8 years. We had identified major capital projects, and we've seen just what the debt load is on the well, what we're facing with respect to the water tower, and that some of our major debts are not going to be coming offline for a few years yet to come. So yes, council has some very challenging situations and realities that we now have to deal with. Debt is probably the most significant, but equally significant is the impacts to parkland dedication, the impacts to soft services funding, and all of those needs that quality of life are contingent upon that we may not be able to support any longer in terms of being sustainable. So yes, this is really overwhelming. And I think that, I think Alice and Jennifer confirmed this was a record number of pages with respect to communication. While it's a one line, you can see just the level of commentary that has been provided. And we've also noted that many municipalities are issuing statements through their mayor on their websites, and we'll certainly regroup with you as council in January on what you'd like us to message out to our community. So sorry, that was a really long message, but this is probably one of the most significant pieces of legislation to impact us outside of the changes to the authorities of mayors in terms of those powers and how that affects what many of us are saying is democracy.
Yeah, okay. All right, so when are you thinking about this overview or report, like early into the year or?
Either late January meeting, the second meeting, or February. Steve Weaver is looking at that. Carrie's playing obviously a tremendous role on the DC side of this, and we just have to wrap our heads around assumptions because we only can deal with our current study.
Okay. All right.
I'll just add to that too, that at the county level, last Thursday, county council just approved a submission that the county CAO and myself had drafted that will be going in. There's also a lot of advocacy through the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus and AMO. I also had a conversation with the Deputy Premier, who happens to be our local MPP, on Friday as well, shared some of my thoughts in a fairly candid way with her. And you know, the point is, quite frankly, I mean, from an infrastructure point of view alone, you know, it's fine to build homes, but if local municipalities can't afford to provide the servicing required to service those homes, they aren't going to do much good to anybody. I know the minister has made some comments about making sure that municipalities are made whole through this process. How that is going to roll out, nobody knows. If that's the case, fine. I mean, if there's another way to do this that they haven't shared yet, you know, I'm happy to entertain that. But at this point, you know, nobody knows. And I think the unknown is part of the reason so many are kind of disappointed with the way this has been handled so far.
I personally don't think the citizens realize that it's their tax, that the way this bill's been written, that's going to be paying for any future infrastructure and whatnot. And I think that's the message we've got to get out to our citizens, to the citizens of the province as well. It's great that the mayors are complaining. I hear Mayor Crombie down in Mississauga and all the rest of the mayors complaining, and AMO and the rest of it, but it's citizens themselves, the taxpayers, that need to realize that it's their taxes that are going to be going up at a considerable rate for a number of years to pay for this particular bill, and have them start calling the MPPs. And I'm sure that this premier, who doesn't seem to think he's a dictator, can turn around the consequences. I'm sorry I have to say that in public, but that's the truth. This bill just ran through and pushed on to the taxpayers of each community.
Well, and for the councillors who were on council the previous term, you know, you'll hear this again, but Denise and I had a meeting with Minister Surma late last summer, I guess it was, talking about infrastructure generally. And I mean, the point I made to the minister at that point is the point I continue to make, that, you know, yes, we're willing to absorb our share of growth, but we're not willing to do that on the backs of our existing taxpayers. You know, if they're insisting that we grow, then, you know, we need some support from that level of government to provide the kind of infrastructure servicing we need to service that growth. and it's not fair to put that on the backs of, those who already live here. So.
Yep,
Yeah,
agreed.
more to come, I'm sure. I mean, some mayors, some municipalities are talking about including a line item in their budget to show exactly, this is what it's going to cost for the municipality to shoulder the burdens. We'll see where that goes, but I mean, that might be a difficult thing to do. It's good rhetoric, but we'll see. More to come, I'm sure.
Definitely.
Any other inquiries? Okay, notices of motion. Councilor Bernardo.
I don't know if the motion I sent to Jennifer would be considered a notice of motion.
I think so.
Get a motion from me? Is that a notice of motion?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have the copy. I think I sent it directly to you. Unfortunately, I should have kept a copy, but I believe that in general, the motion reads, be it resolved that council directs staff to, how did I put it now?
Jennifer, you have it?
I have a copy if you'd like me to read it.
Sure.
Yeah, please, because I can't remember it off the top of my head anymore.
So for staff to investigate how the food bank can fit into the town's budget process as it is an essential service and bring a report back to council.
Okay, I thought it was a little simpler than what I was trying to do.
Okay. So just process wise for our newer members, that motion will be placed on the next agenda and we'll discuss it and debate it and vote on it at that time. So, any other notices of motion? No. Okay. Communications. So we've sort of indirectly talked about item number 14, but anything else that anybody wants to pull out and deal with separately? I would just encourage council members and members of the public to take a look at number 4, which is the economic development sort of year in review. I mean, it just shows that there's a lot of activity in the economic development sphere. Lots of new businesses coming to town, which I'm sure we're all aware of, but it's kind of nice to actually see that quantified, as well as a number of other kind of exciting initiatives that are underway. Anything else? Councilor Bernardo?
Just number 10, the Ontario Municipal Partnership Funding. That doesn't seem to be growing. So going back to Bill 23, I don't see where money is coming through in case we end up on the short end of the stick. That seems to be always shrinking rather than growing.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. As I say, if there's another funding mechanism they're intending to bring in, other than suggesting we look to the federal government. Denise?
Just to clarify, the projections that we were given years ago was that there were going to be reductions in our OCIF and our OMPF. So there was a bit of a blip where they actually went up a bit, but these were reductions that we were anticipating. A lot of municipalities much larger than us. These were significant reductions. So to your point, Councillor Bernardo, yeah, you're not seeing an increase in some of the sustainable funding. You're seeing it marginally decreased each year. Terry can speak to it more, but it just reinforces the strain and the transferability of that pie that the auditors show, where some of these grants are being reduced and then we are reallocating those costs to general levy.
Carrie?
So the 2023 amount is down 18,900 from 2022. So not a lot, but it has gone down. We were experiencing drops of 45,000 at one point. And then when COVID hit, they kind of leveled that off. So it's not as big of a drop as we have seen, but yeah, it's a little bit lower.
Right. Any other items on that list? Okay. I have a motion then to receive those items listed under communications. Councillor Bernardo, second by Councillor Wagner. All in favor? carried. Right, mover and seconder for the confirming bylaw. Deputy Mayor Hall, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. All in favor? Carried. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Sample, seconded by Councillor Gashardi. All in favor? Carried. All right. Well, it was a long one, but we got through a lot. So have a good night. We'll see everybody soon. Merry Christmas. I guess we won't see each other until the new year.
Merry Christmas,
Everyone.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Later. Good night, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Yes, agreed.
Jennifer.